let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Christianity and Psychoanalysis. I'm the executive director here, and I'll be hosting today's workshop presented by our world-renowned speaker, Dr. Martha Stark. My assistant, Abby Wright, will be assisting me with the technology. We have over 400 registrants for today's workshop who are eager to learn from Dr. Stark, either by being here today or by listening to this recording later. Now, a little bit about the center. The mission of the center is rooted and grounded in Christianity and psychoanalysis for the invigoration and deepening of one's life work. The center is a generative community of learning, forming, and serving. Some of you may be wondering what the link between Christianity and psychoanalysis is and how they relate with each other. The link is what brings us here today. We value learning and seeking truth. We value ever growing and ever evolving. We value truth and love. We acknowledge the painful reality of our brokenness, both in ourselves and others in the world, and we work towards mending brokenness, transforming ashes to beauty. We value the work of repair. So now for the logistics. In order to optimize our learning experience, please keep your microphones on mute. Please note that there will not be any designated breaks during the workshop. You're welcome to take a personal break whenever needed. Please put any questions you may have in the chat box. And now for the introduction of our special guest speaker today. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Martha Stark to our community today. Dr. Stark is a graduate of Harvard Medical School and the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. Her expertise in both adult and child psychiatry and integrative psychoanalysis is widely recognized. Martha is the originator and developer of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, a multifaceted approach to deep embodied healing. I was first introduced to Dr. Stark's work during graduate school through her seminal book, Working with Resistance. Several of her books, including the award-winning Modes of Therapeutic Action, Knowledge, Experience, and Relationship, are required reading for graduate students and psychoanalytic candidates, both nationally and internationally. I later met Dr. Stark at the Christian Association for Psychological Studies conference that was held in Dallas, Texas in 2018, where she was the featured speaker for the psychoanalytic track. I was fortunate enough to have had the unexpected opportunity to give her a ride to the airport, as her original transportation plans had fallen through. Dr. Stark's generosity and willingness to engage with my questions during our brief time together left a lasting impression. Since then, I have sought out every opportunity to learn from her, including through intensive online courses through William James College, her weekly free spot supervision group since its inception in January 2024, and online workshops like these sponsored by various academic institutes and organizations. Dr. Stark is an exceptional person with tireless and unwavering dedication to her work and students. She is incredibly resilient, never allowing anything, even lightning bolts, hurricanes, or illness to stop her from showing up. She is unstoppable and has no plans for retiring anytime soon. She is truly an inspiration. She dances through all challenges. We at the center are honored to have Dr. Stark as our guest speaker and affectionately call her the Diva of Psychoanalysis. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Dr. Martha Stark.
Oh, thank you so much, Gina, for that lovely, lovely introduction. It is truly an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Teresa. Please know I can't really see all of you, but I just am so appreciative that you're here. Now, it is being recorded, and am I now going to be the host so I can share my slides? So I'm going to try to share. Okay. Did that happen? Oh, good. Of course, now I can't see Gina. Huh. Okay. It's just blank. So, Abby, maybe you'll fix that. Huh. Oh, golly gee, I just can't even see Jean at all, just the name. So maybe we'll fix that. All right. Well, listen, the technology piece is the part that's sort of the most anxiety provoking for me. But now that I'm here, I just could not be more thrilled. All right. So here we go. They say actually that if you're nervous, and I again was a little nervous about the technology piece, but you're supposed to imagine your audience without their clothes on. But if you're on Zoom, I don't know if that's going to be as relevant. People without their clothes on. So anyway, I'm delighted to be here and to see all these familiar names and faces. Okay, a rock feels no pain and an island never cries. This is basically going to be a whirlwind tour of Model 4 of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, a multifaceted approach to deep embodied healing. And again, with heartfelt gratitude and appreciation to Gina Kwan. I've never had so much pleasure collaborating with someone in presenting material. That's me, busy at work, preparing with PowerPoints, which is one of the most enjoyable things I do. Simon and Garfunkel's well-known "I Am a Rock" captures to perfection the essence of the Model 4 patient's experience of being in the world. A winter's day in a deep and dark December, I am alone, gazing from my window to the streets below, on a freshly fallen, silent shroud of snow. I am a rock, I am an island. I've built walls, a fortress deep and mighty, that none may penetrate. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. It's laughter and it's loving I disdain. I am a rock, I am an island. Don't talk of love. Well, I've heard the word before. It's sleeping in my memory. I won't disturb the slumber of feelings that have died. If I never loved, I never would have cried. I am a rock. I am an island. I have my books and my poetry to protect me. I am shielded in my armor, hiding in my room, safe within my womb. I touch no one, and no one touches me. I am a rock. I am an island. And a rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. And I present that at the start to sort of get you into the feel of things. When I've introduced the different modes of therapeutic action, I now have 5. Some of you sort of totally know them, and others of you are like, huh? But anyway, this is the 4th. It's been this Model 4 where I get messages from all over the place, around the world, saying, oh my God, I'm Model 4. And I think, quite frankly, all of us have some aspect of Model 4 in us. This isn't just about, oh, some of our patients, but rather, it may be a question of degree, but all of us on some level have a false self that we present to the world and the true hidden self underneath. A rock feels no pain and an island never cries. When past experiences of neglect and rejection haunt us, the thought of intimacy becomes fraught with fear and vulnerability, evoking a paralyzing dread and further retreat from the world. And you'll notice the mask that she's wearing. Model 4, an existential humanistic approach to mending brokenness and easing relentless despair. I start with this really powerful quote, anonymous. I gave you a part of me that I knew you could break, but you didn't. And it feels to me as if that's the essence of what happens in a successful Model 4 therapeutic experience. This is the gift that we give those of our patients whose hearts have been shattered and who, at least on some level, are now terrified that their hearts will be once again broken. What the Model 4 patient most needs, and again, that's a little deceptive because, again, people aren't usually just solidly one thing or another. So I'm talking about the more extreme Model 4 patient, just to give you a feel for the issues that we're talking about when the heart has been shattered and there's a kind of relentless despair that dogs the person's heels. What the Model 4 patient most needs in the treatment is to discover that she can surrender what is most private, vulnerable, and precious without then being destroyed. As we shall see, ultimately, the therapeutic goal in this existential humanistic approach to repairing a shattered heart and reclaiming life is a paradoxical one that involves nurturing the patient's capacity to hold in mind simultaneously both sides of her tormented ambivalence about being in the world, despite the appeal of simply surrendering to defeat and succumbing to paralysis and despair, but managing somehow to be able to tolerate being in the world, at least on some level. But it's a kind of paradoxical because both sides of the anguished ambivalence about being authentically engaged with the world, with people, that's still there for many of us. In the evocative words of Sartre, life begins on the other side of despair. But again, the point being, lightness can't exist without darkness. Joy can't exist without the experience also of despair. And you don't just get rid of it and never have it again, but rather both paradoxically exist, is my thought. All right, so here's an overview of our next 2 hours. Model 1 is cognitive. Model 2 is more affective. Model 3 is more relational. Model 4 is existential. And Model 5 is synaptic. And my students have helped me to figure out that, in essence, the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy is a CARES approach to deep embodied healing. Model 1, the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis. Model 2, the corrective provision perspective of self-psychology and other deficit theories. Model 3, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory, Model 4, an existential humanistic approach to healing brokenness and nurturing the surrender to resourceless dependence. Could everybody please be muted? And Model 5 is a quantum neuroscientific approach to analysis paralysis, to neural entrenchment. All right. I'll mention briefly that Model 2, those of you who know my concept of relentless hope, Model 2 is about relentless hope. Model 3 is about relentless outrage. In those moments of dawning recognition that what one has been searching for is not going to be forthcoming. After all, there's the unleashing of a torrent of self-righteous outrage. Model 4, relentless despair, when there is no longer any hope. And no need even then to be outraged, but there is a retreat. So Model 4, then, the therapeutic goal. All of my models, for ease of remembering, encourage going from a defense or rigidity to an adaptation or more resilience. And I have all of the defenses starting with the letter R, and all of the adaptations starting with the letter A. And it did take me several decades to kind of get that going. Model 4, then, there's several ways for me to do this one. Model 4, from relational, there's the R, absence, to authentic presence, there's the A word, from defense, rigid defense, to more flexible adaptation. Or from retreat to accessibility. Or from relentless despair to authentic moments of meeting. I just want you to kind of get into the feel of what we're talking about in Model 4. Or if I want to get all fancy, because it is an existential humanistic approach, this is a little more fancy, from nihilistic rejection of existence, there's the R word, to existential being, as I've come to understand it, a little more evolved than nihilism, to existential acceptance of life's dualities, polarities, complementarities, paradoxes, and uncertainties. Okay, so these are some of the authors we'll be sort of referencing. Viktor Frankl, of course. Existential despair, search for meaning are his terms. Heidegger talks about authentic and inauthentic being in the world with hyphens. Winnicott, our beloved Winnicott, false public self versus the true private self. Of course, he talks about the good enough mother, the facilitating, holding environment. He talks about how with patients, certain kinds of patients, there's the fear of, quote, impingement by a maternal environment, his words, perceived as intrusive and potentially dangerous. Ballant, the area of the basic fault, benign regression to dependence. Balint talks about this beautiful concept of harmonious interpenetrating mix-up, which is what we want. And I know for myself, some of my best moments with my patients is when we really, both of us, have overcome our dread of surrender to being that kind of connected with each other, such that there is really, in the words of Michael Balint, a harmonious interpenetrating mix-up, or his words as well, blissful and peaceful merger. Masood Khan, yes, is the one who introduced this lovely concept of overcoming the dread of surrender to resourceless dependence. Modell, he has some lovely concepts here. Denial of object need, schizoid retreat to affective non-relatedness, Modell's terms, illusions of self-sufficiency, and often, quite frankly, illusions of grandiose self-sufficiency characterize the Model 4 patient. Self-protective isolation, and Modell's words, a precariously established self. R.D. Laing, the divided self, ontological insecurity, existential dread. I mean, a lot of people have been writing about this. It took me actually a number of decades before I finally surrendered to my dear friend Larry Hedges in California. He had been in my face about Model 1, structural conflict, Model 2, structural deficit, Model 3 is relational conflict. You need Model 4, relational deficit. He was one of the few people who knew my theory well enough to know what was missing. And so finally, en route to LAX, we had an incredible conversation, and I saw the light. I said, all right already. And so I introduced Model 4. And quite frankly, I sort of feel that I have to apologize to everybody with whom I was working prior to my coming to appreciate Model 4, because I wasn't doing Model 4 with them. Sort of like with, I do West Coast Swing. I love that. It's the state dance of California, parenthetically. And I take privates, we call them privates from this wonderful fellow, Robert Royston. And he'll be teaching me new things like about spinning or this or that or whatever. I've taken years worth of privates from him. And each time I learn something new, again, I have to go back and apologize to all my previous partners. They're like, oh my God, I wasn't doing it right with my head when we were doing the spinning. But anyway, be that as it may. All right, so Model 4 here. Okay, divided self. Okay, Burnham, the need-fear dilemma, internal dividedness, not the neurotic dividedness of Model 1, but now internal dividedness about even being in relationship. Schizodynamics is what Donald Burnham described it as. Gun trip, schizoid withdrawal, emotional detachment, said he. Ofra Eshel, an Israeli psychoanalyst, I've only more recently come to appreciate her work. Wow. All right. She talks about core unthinkable breakdown, kind of similar to Winnicott, but core unthinkable breakdown. And she talks about the emergence of analytic oneness. And for me, that their expression, if I had to tease out one, it would be that the goal in Model 4, when we're doing Model 4 work, there's also Model 1 work being done, Model 2 work being done, Model 3 work being done, and Model 5 work being done. But when we're trying to fix the relational deficit and ease the existential despair, the relentless despair, and heal the broken heart, there really does need to be, I think, the emergence of, I think I was doing it, but I had not thought to use the words emergence of analytic oneness, the two as one. I describe Model 1 as a one-person psychology. Model 2 is a la Andy Morrison, a 1.5-person psychology. Model 3 is a 2-person intersubjective psychology. Model 4 is a 2 as 1 psychology. Okay, Model 4 facilitation statements. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is here, and I'm going to be suggesting, again, along the lines of facilitating a holding environment that we provide a la Winnicott. Facilitation statements highlight the paradoxical conflict. If you completely and totally understand these last 3 lines, by the time we're done, my job will have been done. Highlight the paradoxical conflict between the desperate desire to be known and the paralyzing terror of being found. Or we could say the relentless search for meaning and the annihilating experience of nothingness. facilitation statements. I'm going to introduce you to them a little bit now and then get back to some other things. Okay, facilitation statements. An existential humanistic approach to nurturing surrender to, analytic oneness and restoring, this is what they do, and restoring meaning, purpose, and direction to a life otherwise unclaimed. Sorry, I guess I wrote that green thing on there. Sorry about that. For patients who, whether momentarily or more characterologically, have self-protectively retreated from engagement with the world of objects because it hurts too much. And I know that when cases are presented to me in supervision, and I appreciate if people could please make sure they're muted. When patients are presented to me in supervision, sometimes the therapist will find herself feeling frustrated that the patient isn't more forthcoming, or that the patient wants to come now every other week instead of every week. And part of Model 4 and understanding fundamentally Model 4 schizo, but psychodynamics, is appreciating that for them, the terror is of being engaged with people for fear that their heart will be shattered yet again. So these facilitation statements are specifically designed to address two sides of the paradoxical relationship between their desire and their terror. On the one hand, the patient's longing to be known, understood, and seen. And on the other hand, the patient's equally intense but opposing need to remain autonomous, self-sufficient, not touched, and not found. Now, let me say, I used to say, as a sort of prototypical facilitation, I might say, a part of you longs to be seen, known, understood. But, and you can say but, and I did that for a number of years, but I think I've shifted more to and, the paradoxical relationship between the two. And another part of you is terrified, feels the need to remain autonomous, self-sufficient, not touched, and is terrified of being found. And both parts exist. And ultimately, the goal is for the patient to become ever more, thank you, Bruce, ever more sensitive to the appreciating the existence of this paradoxical ambivalence. Cautionary words, please. So yes, I do, thank you, Gina, for mentioning it, entirely free, 90-minute every week, entirely free, a spot supervision Zoom session, group every week. And a case is presented to me. And the thing, and I love it. I love my group, and anybody's welcome to reach out to me. You just need some knowledge of my Stark method of psychodynamic synergy and a desire to learn more about the application of psychodynamic theory to clinical practice. But one of the things that comes up most often is, and so thus the cautionary words regarding our work, beware of engaging in heady intellectual work, wherein as cognitive insights, could people please be muted? I would appreciate that.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second, Martha. Hey, Bruce, can you please mute yourself? We're having some technical difficulties and are unable to do it on our end.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Abby, for saying that. I appreciate that. And thank you, Bruce. Yeah. Although, Bruce, stay there because I love looking at your face. So it's all good. All right. So beware, there's a smile. Okay, good. Beware of engaging in heady intellectual work, wherein, and Abby, interrupt anytime you want. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Wherein, as cognitive insights about the patient begin to unfold, both patient and therapist become gently lulled into a false sense of shared satisfaction, creating a comforting illusion of progress, when in truth, the therapy is actually being done on the patient's false self. So someone doesn't have to be just hardcore Model 4, but just more generally, it's a sort of heady intellectual defense against access being gained to the true, authentic, heartfelt self. When in truth, then the therapy is actually being done on the patient's false self and not penetrating to the core of the patient's true self at all. Indeed, in his later years, Winnicott came to the sobering conclusion that, oh, sorry. Oh, dear. I'm so sorry. Okay, good. Sorry. You may wonder what I was doing under there, but let's not worry about that. Okay. Winnicott came to the sobering conclusion that there were probably many times in his own clinical work when therapeutic progress might have appeared to be happening, but when in reality, it had only been happening as if. And as soon as the patient went home, it had disappeared, or by the next session, it was gone. So they kept feelings like, oh, wow, this really cool stuff, these insights, whatever. And yet, quite frankly, nothing was changing. And on some level, Winnicott came to understand it was only as if therapy were being done. And Karen Horney talks about the as if personality, very similar to this. Again, because the work was actually being done on the patient's false or compliant or accommodating self, with the patient's true, authentic self remaining concealed, unexposed, unseen, and untouched. Okay, the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, a multifaceted approach, or a CARES, C-A-R-E-S approach to deep embodied healing. So this real quick, and again, our focus is going to be on model 4, but I want to just contextualize it. Each one of these models was introduced when I became more familiar with the approach. So model 1 in the 70s, the interpretive approach perspective of classical psychoanalysis, when I did my training at the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. Model 2 in the 80s, sort of, oh my goodness, the corrective provision or deficiency compensation perspective of self-psychology and other deficit theories. Model 3 in the 90s, when people out of the William Alanson White Institute in New York and others, kind of really cool people, were talking about the intersubjectivity or more relational approach. So this is the intersubjective approach of contemporary relational theory. That was in the 90s. And then in the 2000 to 2010, 2000s or whatever, that's when Bob Fox and others became much more familiar with the existential humanistic approach, and warms the heart, my God. Okay, and then model 5, and then with Larry Hedges being in my okay, and then model 5, the quantum neuroscientific approach, when I kind of put together all the work that I'd been doing and the training that I'd gotten from Al Pesso, psychomotor psychotherapy, and the EMDR work that I was doing, and my dear Pat Ogden with her sensory motor psychotherapy work and rapid resolution therapy, et cetera, and I came to appreciate the profoundly important therapeutic memory reconsolidation and so on. So model 5. All right. So again, model 1, structural conflict, neurotic conflictedness. So people say, well, what's the diagnosis that goes with these 5? So I can kind of remember it better. All righty. I don't really go with the DSM stuff or ICD stuff, but all right. Then, okay, model 1, the neurotic conflictedness, jammed up. The conflict is an internal one between id, ego, and superego, put very simplistically. Structural conflict, intrapsychic neurotic conflict. Model 2, structural deficit or impaired capacity to be a good parent unto oneself. Narcissistic vulnerability, woundedness, narcissistic entitlement. This is more the narcissist, but again, that's really simplistic to put it that way. Model 3, now we have noxious relatedness. Now, I hope you notice that all these words start with N's. I got lucky on this. Neurotic conflictedness, narcissistic vulnerability, noxious relatedness. Now we have the character disorder, or in the extreme, the borderline. Model 4, non-relatedness, just lifting from Modell, who talked about affective non-relatedness. But non-relatedness, now there's a conflict inside, but now the conflict has to do with being in relationship. Model 1 conflict, but that's an intrapsychic thing. Can I be bad or must I be good? Can I defy or must I comply? That's neurotic intrapsychic. Model 4, internal conflict, but in relation to being in a relationship and being seen and known, the schizoid. Okay, in model 5, quantum neuroscientific, we talk about analysis paralysis, neural entrenchment, or non-action. There's the N word. Individuals who are in a state of paralysis, tethered to their traumatogenic past, trapped in their own conditioned and distorted narratives, and frozen in time. The agents for change. I just want to put in these 5 words just to kind of distinguish. These are catalysts for change. Model 1's ultimately about interpretation, cognitive interpretation. Model 2, one of my sort of favorite concepts, grieving optimal or affective disillusionment, when it turns out that the object is not all of what one had wished and hoped it could be. grieving. And then the cool thing about grieving will be the inevitable adaptive, as opposed to defensive, adaptive is good, internalization of whatever good there was and is, thereby filling in deficit. So grieving. Model 3 is negotiating the unmastered, early on unmastered relational traumas, dynamics that are being reenacted compulsively and unwittingly in the transference at the Darlene Ehrenberg's intimate edge. So negotiating the inevitable emergence of turbulence that will arise in the relationship. We think about projective identification, but it's the here and now engagement that's informed, of course, by the there and then. But the focus in those moments when you're doing model 3 is on the here and now and negotiating. Model 4 is on surrendering. And model 5 is on, now we're talking more specifically about narratives. Again, this is the same person, it's just the focus that we have will shift depending upon what they're introducing in that moment into the treatment, into the session. Okay, so model 5, disentangling from the toxicity of the past, re-scripting the narratives, the stories that become the filters through that were downloaded early on and that have become the filters through which the patient experiences her world and herself, and then updating. Therapeutic memory reconsolidation, juxtaposing in an optimally stressful, growth incentivizing way, mismatch experiences between old bad, conditioned, mindless, reflexive defense and new good, more reflective, more mindful, adaptive response. Old bad, new good, old bad, new good. And just think about EMDR, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, whatever. Okay, anyway, but we're not really talking about that, just I kind of felt the need to say that. So in other words, my method is an integrative approach to deep healing, one that involves the complex interplay of all 5 models, each gaining momentum by virtue of advancement in the other 4. In essence, they're interdependent, none more important than any of the others, and nor is there a sequence. Well, get them more comfortable first, model 2, then do some interpreting, model 1, then negotiate at the intimate edge, model 3, and then help them to regress, model 4, and then what doesn't get done, model 5. No, over the course of a particular session, you might end up doing all 5. All right, synergy. I actually bought that from Shutterstock because it captures so beautifully the essence of it. Resonates with me. Okay, here we go. Here we go. There are patients who, having never fully confronted and grieved the pain of their early on heartbreak, will cling tenaciously to their hope that perhaps someday the object of their desire will be forthcoming. Be that object the infantile object, a contemporary object, or the transference object. And when, we call that relentless hope, and when thwarted in their desire, these patients will be devastated and outraged. Relentless outrage. So relentless hope, model 2, relentless outrage, model 3. But there are other patients, model 4, who, in the aftermath of their early on heartbreak, will find themselves withdrawing completely from the world of objects, their hearts shattered, only then to find themselves overwhelmed by intense feelings of isolation, alienation, and despair. The competent, accomplished, cheerful, compliant, false public self they present to the world, belying the truth that lies hidden within, namely their devastating heartbreak, private pain, harrowing loneliness, and annihilating terror. I think that on some level it's important to get named loneliness, terror, heartbreak in one's work with probably just about anybody. I guess some people could say, nope, nope, never felt loneliness. Nope, nope, never been terrified. Nope, nope, no heartbreak. But anyway, in belying the truth that lies hidden within not only the heartbreak, loneliness, and terror, but also their stymied creativity and their desperate, albeit conflicted, longing for meaningful connectedness with the world and with life itself. The false self presented to the world belies the painful truths hidden within. Instead of relentless hope, which figures prominently in my self-psychological model 2, which is an absence of good model, that focuses on the patient's relentless pursuit of new good to correct for what was never provided consistently and reliably early on, or relentless outrage, which figures prominently in my contemporary relational model 3, which is a presence of bad model that focuses on the patient's compulsive and unwitting reenactment of old bad, i.e. unmastered early on relational traumas. The experience of being in the world, I'm lifting from Heidegger when I put it that way, for model 4 patients is one of relentless despair, a profound hopelessness they keep hidden behind the false self mask they present to the world, a self-protective armor that conceals the deeply entrenched brokenness of the true self and its thwarted potential. I grew to understand that people don't always build walls to keep others out. It's not just that. There are times it is done out of a necessity to protect whatever is left within. Whereas the relentless hope of the Model 2 patient and the relentless outrage of the Model 3 patient speak to ongoing and intense, albeit conflicted, engagement with the world of objects, the relentless despair of the Model 4 patient speaks to utter lack of any real engagement with the world of objects, despite the patient's secret and intense, albeit conflicted, yearning for meaningful and authentic connectedness with others. In other words, Model 2 and Model 3 patients are still desperately holding on, but the Model 4 patient has self-protectively let go. Again, the Model 4 patient's self-protective retreat to non-relatedness is her defensive reaction to intolerably painful responses from the world of objects. Whether, this is important, the retreat is simply a fleeting defensive reaction, like in the moment, a momentary state, because the patient's heart has been so profoundly hurt in the moment, or a more enduring characterological stance, that is a more defining character trait, because the patient's heart has been so deeply wounded over time as a result of both little t and big T traumas, that she has simply withdrawn from the world of objects, having relinquished all hope for meaningful, authentic moments of meeting. Okay, Robert. Okay, a dear man with Asperger's. You know, that wasn't supposed to be there, but anyway, we'll go with it. Good to be flexible. All right, Robert. And now I wanted to share with you a story about my patient, Robert, a dear man on the spectrum. Robert was a brilliantly, sorry, I know I'm covering over part of that, but I want to be able to read this. Robert was a brilliantly prolific and well-known writer, ever gracious and polite. Everybody liked him, although people didn't really matter all that much to him. Nonetheless, this dear man somehow managed to be in therapy with me for many years, but mostly because his wife, Jane, insisted that he keep coming. So he and I decided to make the most of it and settled into a very comfortable routine of weekly conversations, as we called them, in which we discussed things like complex, adaptive, nonlinear, dynamical, self-organizing, chaotic systems, and this, our confusing world, made up of islands of predictability amidst a sea of chaotic unpredictability. He loved talking about that, and quite frankly, so did I. Actually, we had a great time of it. And Jane was extremely grateful because she felt that over time, Robert was indeed becoming much more present in their relationship and engaged. Amongst other things, I would have him memorize certain socially appropriate behaviors. For example, that he needed to make a fuss over Jane's birthday, and that he needed to make some effort to stay in touch with his adult kids. Every now and then, anyway. He told me that I was helping him to appreciate the importance of using his intelligence to figure out what he should be doing in different situations. We decided to call it cognitive empathy, doing the right thing, not from the heart, but from the head. Jane, albeit a bit controlling, was a good woman who loved Robert dearly. And Robert was extremely attached to her and loved her very much, even though he had difficulty telling her that. So one day I found a poem by Aaron Hansen that I thought captured beautifully the essence of Robert's feelings for her. He and I decided to rewrite the poem in order to make it a custom fit. He wanted to call the poem To Jane from Robert, but I told him he should call it To Jane with Love from Robert. So he did. We invited Jane to join us for one of our sessions so that Robert could read our poem to her. You say it is hard to keep waiting for me to say, I love you too. But I have been telling you every day. In many ways, you never knew. It pours down upon the umbrella that I hold for you in the rain, is captured when I kiss your bruises in order to relieve your pain. It's in the cake I bake for you and offer you the biggest slice. And when you tell me that you love it, how I then bake it for you twice. It's buckled into the seat belt I always tell you to put on, and in all the ways that I miss you whenever I find that you're gone. Maybe I don't say those 4 words, I love you too, in the routine and standard way, but please let my actions speak louder than anything I might say. So if you are tired of waiting for those 4 words to leave my throat, all I can say is that outside it's cold. So don't forget to take your coat. As Jane listened, yeah, thank you for the smiles from you all and a few tears. As Jane listened, she wept and said it helped her to understand him a little better. And then she leaned over and kissed him tenderly on the lips, a kiss he returned. Robert, by then 58, died a little while later. He had been suddenly stricken with terminal cancer, but told me matter-of-factly that he was not afraid to die. He said that his family would be better off after he died because of his generous life insurance policy. Robert wanted to continue our work right up to the end. Interestingly, never once did he flinch in the face of his impending death. It held no fear for him. Unlike Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night, in which Dylan Thomas is urging his father to rage against the dying of the light. Excuse me, Robert accepted with grace and dignity the fact that he would be dying from his cancer. Those many of us who loved Robert still grieve his passing. All right, well, let me just get myself reoriented here. Whoops. Okay, there you go. Whew. Okay. And let me just say, I think that is an example of Model 4 work. I wasn't needing him to do any particular anything, but just being there and holding him and delighting in him and enjoying him and being there in the way that, as we'll see later, a devoted mother, unfalteringly reliable and so there for him would be. So there are different ways of being Model 4. Okay. I have one patient where we pass back and forth this wonderful little stone, and we don't even talk about it, but she'll come in and give it to me. I don't even remember if it was hers originally or mine. Oh, and she'll come in and she'll hand me this little stone, and I'll sort of go like this, and then I keep it for days, weeks, months, whatever. And then I decide I want to give it back to her. So I just hand it over to her. Nobody says anything, and then she takes it. She brings it back, and she's ready. It's very sweet. That's very sweet. Okay, Model 4, a heart shattered, the private self, and a life unlived. Secrets, lies, and pretensions. The shattering of a heart when being broken is the loudest quiet ever. Okay, Viktor Frankl's Existential Despair, Man's Search for Meaning, probably you all read it in college. He writes, D equals S minus M. Existential despair, says he, equals suffering, but without meaning. My slight paraphrase would be relentless despair equals solitary suffering without meaningful moments of meeting, without those precious, cherished moments of authentic meeting with others that have the potential to give one's life meaning, purpose, and direction, treasured moments that the Model 4 patient rarely experiences. Martin Heidegger, The Importance of Authenticity as Giving Meaning, Purpose, and Direction to a Person's Life. I'm so sorry. I personally think that this winter is way too cold. Just saying. On the one hand, Martin Heidegger, authentic being in the world refers to the attempt to live one's life according to the needs of one's inner being, rather than to the demands of one's early conditioning or of society. It always involves this element of freedom and choice, authenticity. On the other hand, inauthenticity refers to living one's life as determined by outside forces, expectations, pressures, and demands. Heidegger's authentic existence is equivalent to Winnicott's true private self, a self that is also creative and spontaneous, a life that is real. The goal in life, says Heidegger, is always a striving toward authentic being in the world. So Heidegger's inauthentic existence is equivalent to Winnicott's false public self, a self that is also compliant and accommodating, but a life that is not real, a life unlived. And the name of my book, where I write about this, is called, let's see if I can remember it, A Heart Shattered, the Private Self, or the Impenetrable Self, and a Life Unlived. That's the title, Model 4. Okay, Kelly Clarkson. Let me get back to this. Okay, here we go. Oh dear, I hope you can see most of that. Kelly Clarkson's emotionally raw, vulnerable. Well, I hope you can see it. Kelly Clarkson's emotionally raw, vulnerable, and hauntingly beautiful songs speak of the heartbreak and subsequent shutdown that she experienced because of her father's traumatic abandonment of her and her family when she was only 6 years old. The essence of which she captures in her well-known and anguished song entitled Because of You, parts of which I will quote here, a song she herself wrote, in which she makes reference to the false self she now presents to the world in order to cover the pain of her early on heartbreak at the hands of her father. Because of you, I never stray too far from the sidewalk. Because of you, I learned to play on the safe side so I don't get hurt. Because of you, I find it hard to trust not only me, but everyone around me. Because of you, I am afraid. I lose my way, and it's not too long before you point it out. I cannot cry because I know that's weakness in your eyes. I'm forced to fake a smile, a laugh every day of my life. My heart can't possibly break when it wasn't even whole to start with. Because of you, I never stray too far from the sidewalk. Because of you, I learned to play on the safe side so I don't get hurt. Because of you, I try my hardest just to forget everything. Because of you, I don't know how to let anyone else in. Because of you, I'm ashamed of my life because it's empty. Because of you, I am afraid. Because of you, because of you. All right, Richard Cory. The narrative poem Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson also captures poignantly the great divide that can exist between the public or false self and the private or true self. Here it goes. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked till dawn, waiting for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. On the surface of things, Richard Cory appeared to have it all: riches, grace, impeccable good manners, charm, glitter, imperial good looks. But despite his regal bearing and enviable wealth, his life was empty and internally impoverished. And one calm summer night, he simply went home and put a bullet through his head to end it all. Chessie Kryst. Chessie Kryst, I felt especially connected, as we all did, who watched Extra, that show, entertainment show on TV with Mario Lopez. I watched it every night. Chessie Kryst, 30 years old, high achieving, a beautiful soul with ever so many accomplishments, a track star in high school, an honors student in college, an MBA and a JD from Wake Forest University, a practicing attorney advocating for social justice and civil rights, an entrepreneur, financially successful, a role model who inspired women around the world, a model featured on the cover of magazines, a beauty queen, Miss North Carolina, Miss USA in 2019, a television host every weekday night on the entertainment news program Extra, a respected interviewer of celebrities on the red carpet at the pinnacle of a spectacular career, beloved by a wide circle of friends, daily conversations with her cherished mom, to whom she referred as her superhero, described by all as the embodiment of love, and a ball of sunshine wrapped in smiles. So I wrote a poem for her along the lines of the Richard Cory narrative poem. I didn't do as well as that, but here we go. Whenever Chessie Kryst went downtown, we people on the pavement gazed at her with admiration and awe. She was the embodiment of perfection from soul to crown, dazzlingly beautiful and imperially slim. And she was always so fashionably attired and always so gracious whenever she spoke. But still she fluttered pulses when she would announce extra, extra, and she glittered when she walked. A practicing attorney and an entrepreneur, she lived in a luxury midtown Manhattan high-rise. In fine, we thought that she was everything to make us wish that we were in her place. But the mantle of perfection and stellar achievements that she donned every day became eventually too heavy to bear. So Chessie Kryst, one cold winter morn, got up and leapt to her death from the 25th floor. May Chessie rest in peace. I mean, she was on Extra Extra the night before. I was watching her. We all loved her. The next morning, she was dead. Okay. All right. Donna Winnicott's false self, indeed relevant with respect to Kelly Clarkson, Richard Cory, and Chessie Kryst, is Winnicott's concept of the false self, a self-protective defensive armor mobilized early on in life to protect the, and the things in quotes are his words, the privacy of the true self from impingement by a maternal or caretaking, he said maternal environment perceived as intrusive and potentially dangerous. The point being that the little one experienced the maternal environment as intrusive and potentially dangerous. The person who eventually develops a false self never had the experience of a good enough mother, able to provide a protective envelope, a facilitating or holding environment within which the young child's inherited potential, Winnicott's words, could become actualized. At a time when it's age appropriate for the infant to have an unfalteringly reliable mother upon whom she can be absolutely dependent, said Winnicott. The mother's inability to meet the omnipotence. And again, the reverse of this is what we want to be doing. And I'm going to give an example, develop a little example, clinical vignette for you in a moment. The mother's inability to meet the omnipotence of her young child will be completely annihilating. As a result, says Winnicott, the nascent true self of the infant, the potential source of spontaneity, creativity, and personal agency, will go into hiding, avoiding at all cost the possibility of exposing itself without being recognized and responded to. Its essence will therefore remain, Winnicott said, incommunicado, its core unseen, unacknowledged, undeveloped. On the one hand, desperate to remain hidden, but terrified then of disappearing. On the other hand, desperate to be known, but terrified of being found. It is a joy to be hidden, said Winnicott, one of the favorite, well-known quotes of Winnicott's. I love that. It is a joy to be hidden, but a disaster not to be found. And it's important to understand that, and that's what I'm hoping will be the takeaway. When the true self is not recognized and responded to, what then crystallizes out over time will be a false self, a public or social self that will gradually become ever more adept at accommodating itself chameleon-like to whatever it senses is expected of it. So if our patients sense that we want them to sort of get insights, cognitive insights, they'll give that to us. And we'll think, wow, they're just so smart and psychologically savvy. That's where the earlier on caution about beware of doing heady intellectual work, because it might well be being done simply on the false self. All the while, patient, keeping hidden its underlying anguish and heartbroken despair. The person will live, but the existence will be empty, hollow, shallow, false, and desperately lonely. It will be a lie, one based on compliance and conformity, not one based on authenticity and truth. The person will make a show of being real, but it will only be a semblance of the truth. It will only be as if she is alive, because her life will have become a sham, a charade, a part she's playing. She may well say she feels like an imposter. That doesn't necessarily mean Model 4, but it might. A borrowed identity assumed for the occasion, a life unlived, because she is living a lie, secrets, pretensions, concealments. Everyone, and now this is sort of relevant for all of us, we all have parts of ourselves that have never been exposed. Here we go. Everyone has at least one secret that would break your heart. All right, now in order to understand the therapeutic action in Model 4, we will be drawing upon Winnicott's depiction of the young child's maturational progression from absolute dependence to relative dependence, and then towards autonomy, but mostly the first two stages in the maturational progression. Successful advancement, it's maturational. The kid's going to progress even so, but we're talking about successful advancement from that first stage of absolute dependence to the second stage of relative dependence, and ultimately to the third stage of towards autonomy, is a result of the therapeutic provision of a holding or facilitating environment, whatever form that might take, provided by a good enough mother able to meet the omnipotence of her young child. A therapist who does not mind being controlled. That is an affectively attuned mother, able to, Winnicott's words here, all of this, recognize and respond to each and every one of her young child's needs, having often anticipated many of them prior even to the child's having signaled her need or her desire. Oh, okay, Amy. So this is, I'm so sorry. It's so, my relative humidity here in this place in Cambridge is 18%. So my apologies for my throat here. All right, let me get to this vignette. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So I present now, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I present now a clinical vignette that demonstrates the powerfully healing impact of a therapist's willingness to honor her patient's need for omnipotent control of her objects when that age-appropriate developmental need has been traumatically thwarted early on, even if inadvertently, by an impinging and therefore annihilating maternal environment. More specifically, this case speaks to the transformative power of revisiting, in this case, playfully, the maturational stage of absolute dependence in order to correct for early on traumatic frustration of the child's healthy developmental ego need to be met. Okay, I worked with Amy weekly for 2 years from ages 7 to 9. Mother had originally brought her in because Amy had become a serious behavior problem in school and was now also getting bad grades. Mother reported that Amy, at the time 7 initially, had always been a very sad little girl, but had never been willing or able to talk to anybody about what was really going on inside her. Amy didn't have any friends and mostly played by herself in her room. Mother had taken Amy to see a number of different therapists over the course of the previous 3 years, but Amy had refused to talk to all of them. Mother, who was admittedly a bit over-controlling, was nonetheless very well-intentioned and in a tremendous amount of pain because she was feeling so completely shut out of her daughter's world. And in addition to her daughter's depression, now the problematic behaviors in school and the bad grades, in the face of which Mother felt completely overwhelmed and helpless. A colleague of mine saw Mother, I saw Amy. Every week in our therapy sessions, Amy would have us play school. She was the teacher and I was her student. Actually, it seemed to me that she was a rather strict teacher, but then she seemed to feel that I was a rather naughty student. In truth, Amy was quite a stern taskmaster, quite a tough disciplinarian, and I might add, not always very nice about it. Believe me, I did the best that I could to be very good, to respond as best I could to each and every one of her many commands, but she was relentless and quite punitive. Sometimes Amy would demand that I sit at the little school desk that I had in my office, a tiny little thing into which I could barely fit at all. But whenever I would complain about how small the desk was, she would tell me that it only seemed that way because I was so fat and that I should be quiet. Periodically, she would tell me to stand up. And as soon as I'd struggled out of the little desk to my feet, she would insist that I be promptly seated, up and down, again and again and again. Amy would tell me that my posture needed improvement and that I needed to stand up straighter so that I would look taller. If I didn't react quickly enough, Amy would send me to the corner of the room where I was to stand by myself in order to think about how bad I had been. Or if she were mad at me because she thought that I had been misbehaving and needed to be punished, she would get particular pleasure from making me go to the blackboard where I was to write over and over again, I have been very bad, I have been very bad, and then I was to sign it. So I would write that again and again on the doggone blackboard, although I kept telling her that I didn't like the chalk or the blackboard, but she would tell me that that didn't matter and that I had to keep doing it anyway. So I would make a face while I was doing it, which I know she saw. Amy would give me homework assignments that I was to do between sessions. Of course, I would do them, but she would always give me a bad grade on them, even when I'd gotten all the answers right. When I would, thank you, I appreciate that. But actually, that was fun for me to hear. But again, please, everybody to be muted. When I would complain and ask her why my grade was so bad, she would tell me that it was because I was so dumb. Oh, Amy was a tough little tyrant. Believe me, I never once challenged her authority, and I always did the very best that I could to accommodate myself to every single one of her imperious commands. Amy just loved bossing me around, and as it happens, I didn't really mind either, except for the part about the chalk and the blackboard. Interestingly, she never once asked me to do something that I really wouldn't have been able to do. In other words, she never once put me in the untenable position of having to say no to her. So over the course of our 2 years together, I did basically everything she demanded that I do. I offered her no resistance, nor did I interpret her need to be in control. I did not, for example, suggest that perhaps her need to have omnipotent control over me was compensatory for underlying feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy in relation to her somewhat domineering mother. Indeed, I wanted Amy to have the actual experience of being able to exercise complete control over her surroundings, an experience that I sensed she had been denied as an infant and was now being denied as a latency age child in the relationship with her well-intentioned but anxiously over-controlling mother. Meanwhile, I was beginning to hear from Mother's therapist that Amy was behaving much better in school and was no longer engaging in the negative attention-getting behaviors that had originally brought her to treatment. Amy was also beginning to talk to her mother and now had a few friends. And Mother reported that Amy didn't seem to be so sad anymore. Simultaneously, there came a time in our own work when my little friend appeared to need less and less for me to accommodate myself to her every need. And as she developed confidence in her ability to control her world, she no longer had the same need to be constantly demonstrating this power in relation to me, and was indeed gradually, in Winnicott's words, abrogating some of her defensive omnipotence. In our sessions, Amy became less tyrannical, less bossy, less controlling, more vulnerable, more accessible, softer, gentler, more tender. And sometimes to reward me when she thought that I had been particularly obedient, or when she was especially pleased with my progress, as she called it. She would give me a little pat on my back. One time, she even told me that something I had done was very good. Amy also started to give me A's on my homework assignments. And sometimes she would even give me a little star for my homework because I'd done it so neatly. Lovely, shiny gold stars that she would bring in from home for me. And then one day, Amy brought in her own report card for me to see. Without a word, but with a big, happy, triumphant smile, she proudly presented it to me, and it had all A's on it. My little friend and I, we certainly did other things over the course of our 2 years together, including maybe a little bit of interpretive work, although not really. But I believe that what was most healing for her was my non-demanding, non-intrusive, non-controlling stance, and my willingness to provide her with consistent gratification of her need for omnipotent control of her environment, a developmental ego need that had been traumatically thwarted early on, thereby prompting her psychic retreat and schizoid withdrawal from the world. Okay,
Hi,
at the end of the
Martha.
day.
Before you go to the next slide, I'm just going to ask Pauline Pinto to please mute yourself so we don't interfere.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And can she do that, or do you have, you requested that she unmute, that she mute?
Yes, she
Okay,
should.
good. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, interrupt anytime. At the end of the day, I believe that what was transformative for Amy was my ability to create a safe space into which she could deliver what most needed to be delivered, namely, her need to be able to feel in control so that she would be able to risk becoming absolutely dependent on me, a stand-in for her mother, without the fear of a catastrophically annihilating response that would once again shatter her vulnerable heart. Okay, more generally, I conceive the therapeutic action in Model 4 as involving this co-creation of a transitional space between patient and therapist, created in part by the patient and her defensive, as opposed to adaptive capacity, defensive need, and her defensive need to be in total control. That's the patient's contribution. And in part by the therapist and her adaptive capacity to delight in being controlled. A co-constructed, co-created potential space into which the patient, who has emotionally shut down as a result of having had her heart shattered early on, can begin to deliver the parts of herself that are most vulnerable, most fragile, and most prone to breakage. And then can gradually discover, to her utter surprise and absolute delight, that her therapist will be so unfalteringly reliable, intuitively sensitive, gently attuned, lovingly present, and tenderly devoted to her care, that she need no longer worry quite so much about having her heart once again shattered. In essence, the therapeutic action in Model 4 involves, in any of a number of ways, but giving the patient an opportunity to regress. We invite them to regress. We want this to the stage of absolute dependence, but with a different, much better outcome this time. Regression to redo, not as relevant in models 1, 2, 3, or 5, but in model 4. Existential, this is also referred to, we talked about absolute dependence, and we will talk soon about resources dependence and infantile dependence and therapeutic dependence. But anyway, existential or ontological dependence is a term that is used, Fabrice Carrera, meaning absolute reliance upon another for one's very existence, one's very identity. For those of you, For those of you who know that I'm passionate about the growth incentivizing power of optimal stress in each of my 5 models, you might find yourselves wondering, well, what's the optimal stressor in model 4? Well, indeed, the challenge for the Model 4 patient lies in slowly, gradually overcoming the dread of surrendering to absolute dependence on you, which will also, we'll get into this in a moment, involve often your own overcoming of your own dread of surrendering to the relationship and to precious moments of meeting, an experience that the patient will then be able to expand or generalize from the small to the all. If she can do it with you, then eventually she'll be able to do it more generally. You know, that's the way things work. Okay, Michael Balint, a little bit here, please. Also relevant here is the distinction Balint makes between malignant regression, not so good, and benign regression. In essence, when id needs are gratified, which I define as if you give them an inch, they take a mile. That's an id need. That means you shouldn't have gratified it. Ego needs, says Winnicott and Balint and others, those should be gratified, because if you gratify them, then at least momentarily, they really do feel so much better and so grateful. So in essence, when id needs are gratified, it is usually disastrous for both patient and therapist and can pose a real threat to the ongoing treatment, especially when it occasions the patient's malignant regression to insatiable hunger for ever more. But when the patient's ego needs are gratified, which is what we want to have happen, there is opportunity, says Balint, and Winnicott would agree, for benign regression in the service of the ego, or benign regression in the service of the treatment, to a stage in the patient's development that had not been properly negotiated at the time, but that can now be renegotiated in the hope of achieving a better outcome this time. More specifically, Balint writes about the therapeutic value of benign regression to dependence for those patients who have developed a basic fault because of failure in the early on environmental provision. I mean, they're all kind of talking about the same thing, just using slightly different words. Balint speaks to the importance, therefore, of allowing for, and this, as I indicated earlier, just speaks to me, a harmonious, interpenetrating mix-up. And not to be too revealing here, but the best of lovemaking, I think, can involve harmonious, interpenetrating mix-up where you lose track of whose arm, leg, whatever belongs to which. Harmonious, interpenetrating mix-up, said Bolland, between patient and therapist. And I know I've certainly experienced this on occasion with patients, where it's sort of like the two of you are as one, the emergence of Ofra Eschel's analytic oneness, a state of blissful, peaceful merger, the two of you, such that at least every now and then the patient can have the life and self-affirming experience of blissful, peaceful merger with another, namely the therapist, and can then hopefully generalize it from the small to the all, a powerfully healing experience needed to correct for what had been missing early on. But again, remembering always the patient's ambivalence about whether or not they're going to allow themselves to have it. That will probably on some level remain with them. Okay, to review, whereas Winnicott's interest is in the false self and the clinical importance of providing a holding environment to facilitate birthing, a new beginning, a starting over, says Winnicott, of the true self, and Bolland's interest is in the area of the basic fault and the clinical importance of fostering a benign regression to make possible a new beginning. I guess it was Bolland who said new beginning, not Winnicott. Sorry about that. Both Winnicott and Bolland are addressing the toxic impact of unmastered early on relational failures. Those are actually my words. And the therapeutic impact of environmental provision in the here and now to correct for what had not been consistently and reliably provided in the there and then. Along these same lines, Christopher Bolus has written about ordinary regression to dependence, a regression that will be arrested by the therapist's interpretations. Beware of interpreting. You can do it every now and then, but that's probably not the thing that will be, and I'm going to present an extended vignette shortly, and you'll see. Anyway, the primary thing was not what was said. A regression that will be arrested by the therapist's interpretations, but fostered by the therapist's receptivity, and I'm adding responsivity. In sum, I draw upon Winnicott's regression to absolute dependence, Bolland's benign regression in the service of the ego, and Bolus's ordinary regression to dependence to capture the essence of what I believe is at the heart of what we must provide for our Model 4 patients, namely an opportunity to experience therapeutic regression to dependence, such that there can be occasional moments of joyful meeting, harmonious interpenetrating mix-up, and blissful, peaceful merger, an opportunity to regress in order to redo. And some of you know that I'm really kind of into energy medicine, and in energy medicine, scalar energy involves a resetting of the polarity of all the cells in your body, and I'm all about that, and I have a little device that I'm trying to make myself younger, but anyway, that kind of resets all the cells. I see your smile, Abby. All right, so anyway, okay, Keith Urban and Carrie Underwood here. I'm reminded of Keith Urban and Carrie Underwood's beautiful duet called The Fighter, in which a woman, here representing the Model 4 patient, whose precious heart had been broken at an earlier time in her life, keeps asking for and needing reassurance in the song that were she to fall, were she to cry, were she to be scared, her man, here representing the Model 4 therapist, would be there to catch her and to hold her tight. And if you've seen Keith Urban and Carrie Underwood, oh, eye candy, my God, singing the duet together in person. Oh, my God. I mean, you almost get healed just watching. So, I mean, yeah, if Keith Urban were to sing that to me, oh my God, I'd be covered from now to the end of my life. All right, the chorus of the song goes as follows. What if I fall, Carrie Underwood? I won't let you fall, Keith Urban. What if I cry? I'll never make you cry. And if I get scared, I'll hold you tighter. When they're trying to get to you, baby, I'll be the fighter. But what if I fall? I won't let you fall. What if I cry? I promise I'll never make you cry. And if I get scared, I'll hold you tighter. When they're trying to get to you, baby, I'll be the fighter. Especially relevant, I just have to mention her here more officially, whoops, is Oprah Shell's concept of analytic oneness as a fundamental dimension of analytic presence. And she talks about from intersubjectivity, model 3, and witnessing to interconnectedness and with witnessing, the H in witnessing, and presencing, she talks about. As Shell opens the boundaries of her own psyche so that she can listen to her patients with a hearing heart. Without hesitation, she immerses herself in the patient's experiential world and surrenders to the unfolding analytic process. She does this, and not just over here intellectually, well, it occurs to me that, in order to facilitate the emergence, as she calls it, of patient analyst two in oneness. Shell believes that being in oneness with the patient's emotional reality is the only analytic stance that can meet and transform core unthinkable breakdown into a breakthrough and opportunity for recovery of self and return of hope. Let me move on. Here's something, a wonderful quote by Louise Erdrich that I tried to make pretty, and maybe you can watch that at your leisure. It's good. It's powerful. Okay, Masud Khan, I just have to mention 2 slides on him, my eyes on the time. The privacy of the self. In a brilliant 1972 paper published in the International Journal of Psychoanalysis, Khan writes about the importance of giving patients who have emotionally withdrawn from the world of objects an opportunity to overcome their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence on the therapist. Yes, an emotional surrender that will hopefully be experienced by the patient as transcendent, liberating, and transformative, and not simply as a defeat. Kahn's resources dependence is, of course, akin to Winnicott's absolute dependence. Kahn specifies that equally importantly, the therapist must be able to overcome her own dread of surrender to the therapeutic process, her own hesitation about bringing her authentic self into the treatment room, and her own anxieties about letting herself be controlled by the patient. If there is ever to be hope that the patient, in her turn, will be able eventually to overcome her dread of surrender to infantile dependence on the therapist. Kahn describes this process of mutual surrender, and Karen Marotta also does, as one that allows the patient to find herself through another, namely to discover her authentic self by way of experiencing the therapist's capacity to deliver her authentic self into the relationship. Okay, gun trip. Now, let me just, I want to be able, my eyes on the time here a little bit. Of course, obviously, gun trip and Modell, Lang, and Burnham. Facilitation. Oh, dear. Okay. I'm so sorry. Let me just say something. I will be with you in a moment. Oh, my gosh. Oh, dear, how unfortunate. I left out. Damn. I hope you'll cut that word out. I left out. I'm sorry. I just want to see if I have it anywhere here. Oh, I can't believe it. I left out. Oh, okay. All right. I have to do this. I have to do this. This I just have to do. Gun trip's important too, but I have to read you this thing. This is so model 4. Okay, here we go. Love, Anthony is a beautiful, loving, and poignant novel that Lisa Genova, a best-selling author and neuroscientist, writes about Anthony, an autistic boy who never spoke, who loved Barney, the number 3, and lining up rocks, who did not like to be touched, and who did not make eye contact, but who taught his mom an incredible lesson about loving. And I think it's just so relevant to what we're talking about here that I just had to include this. So thank you for bearing with me, even though I guess it's not on the slides. As the author writes the book and Anthony's autism becomes more familiar to her, She begins to see more and more the ways in which she and he are similar. She chews her fingernails as a form of self-soothing. She feels calm when her house is clean and all the picture frames level and centered. She cannot stand the thought of someone else sitting in her seat at the library. She feels agitated when there's too much noise around her, and sometimes she just needs to be alone. And as the author continues to write, she comes to see that their real similarities have nothing to do with autism. She begins to realize that the book is more about Anthony the boy than Anthony the boy with autism. Autism becomes almost irrelevant and eventually is simply writing about Anthony, a person worthy of happiness and safety, of feeling wanted and loved, just like her, sort of more like the equality, patient and therapist, Anthony and the writer of this book, Lisa Genova. The more she writes about Anthony, the more she realizes that she's actually writing about herself. And the more we enter into the patient's experience and really take it on as our own, and there's the emergence of analytic oneness, it's really the two of us in sync with each other, both of us truly changed as a result of having those moments of incredibly precious and meaningful meeting. Anthony teaches, she writes this book, Anthony teaches the mother a lesson her heart needed to learn, which is captured in a fictional letter that Anthony writes to her prior to his untimely death at age 8 from a grand mal seizure. Dear Mom, so she writes this on his behalf. Dear Mom, you already possess the answers to your questions. You already hold them in your heart, but your mind still resists. I understand that sometimes we need reassurance to hear the words, I love you too, a two-way conversation. But I wasn't here to do the things you dreamed and even feared I'd do before I was born. I wasn't here to play Little League, go to the prom, go to college, go to war, become a doctor or a lawyer or a mathematician, although I would have been great at that one. I wasn't here to be married, to have children and grandchildren, or to grow to be an old man. All that has been done or will be done. And I wasn't here to help others understand immunology, gastroenterology, genetics, or neuroscience. I wasn't here to solve the riddle of autism. Those answers are for another time. I came here to simply be, and the autism was the vehicle of my being. Although my short life was difficult at times, I found great joy in being Anthony. Autism made it difficult to connect with you and Dad and other people through things like eye contact and conversation and your activities. But I wasn't interested in connecting in those ways, so I felt no deprivation in this. I connected in other ways, through the song of your voices, the energy of your emotions, the comfort in being near you, and sometimes in moments I treasured through sharing the experience of something I loved, the blue sky, my rocks, the three pigs story. And I know that some of the people on this call have children who are neurodivergent and are on the spectrum, and I'm offering this especially to you all. And you, Mom, I loved you. You've asked if I felt and understood that you loved me. Of course I did. And you know this. I loved your love because it kept me safe and happy and wanted. And it existed beyond words and hugs and eyes. This brings me to the other reason I was here. I was here for you, Mom. I was here to teach you about love. Most people love with a guarded heart. Only if certain things happen or don't happen, only to a point. If the person we love hurts us, betrays us, abandons us, disappoints us, if the person becomes hard to love, we often stop loving. We protect our delicate hearts. We close off, retreat, withhold, disconnect, and withdraw. We might even hate. Most people love conditionally. Most people are never asked to love with a whole and open heart. They only love part way. They get by. Autism was my gift to you. My autism didn't let me hug and kiss you. It didn't allow me to look into your eyes. It didn't let me say aloud the words you so desperately wanted to hear with your ears. But you loved me anyway. You're thinking, of course I did. Anyone would have. This isn't true. Loving me with a full and accepting heart, loving all of me, required you to grow. Despite your heartache and disappointment, your fears and frustration and sorrow, despite all I couldn't show you in return, you came to love me and to love me unconditionally. You haven't experienced this kind of love with dad or your parents or your sister or anyone else before. But now you know what unconditional love is. I know my death has hurt you and you've needed time alone to heal. You'll still miss me. I miss you too. But you're ready now. Take what you've learned and love someone again. Find someone to love and love without condition. This is why we're all here. Love, Anthony. All right. Well, let me say that segues. I'm so glad I got that in there. That segues into what I really, my extended vignette. My eye is on the time. And if Abby or Gina could maybe now show my face and not just a slide. I don't know if that's a possibility, but if that could be, I would appreciate that. All right. So this is called Thomas, a beautiful story. Thomas's intense yearning for one more dance with his father. All right. I present now an extended, well, I know. I think maybe you're still, I know I can stop share. Ha! All right. Who knew? All right. And now maybe you'll be able to highlight me. Maybe.
Yes, you're pinned, Martha.
Oh, good. So you see me. Okay. Now I need to see what I was reading. Okay, here I am. Okay, here we go. So I present now an extended clinical vignette, thank you, Gina, that I've entitled Thomas, a beautiful story about his intense yearning for one more dance with his father. I think it captures beautifully the essence of all that we've been addressing to this point. I worked with Thomas for 6 years, from 2000 to 2006. By the time Thomas had terminated, he was no longer a dissociated, alienated, lonely, frightened control freak, but a wonderfully engaged man who was living his life in an authentic and heartfelt way. When first he came to me, Thomas was 24, a tall, lean, prematurely white-haired, handsome, bespectacled man, a college dropout, who had nonetheless managed, by dint of his hard work, to become the owner of a fairly successful restaurant in Brookline, Massachusetts. He presented with an agitated depression, reporting that his personal life had become a total mess because of some really bad choices that he had made along the way. Thomas said he was desperate and needed my help in figuring out what he should do to straighten out his life. Thomas was in a painfully empty marriage to Sandra, whom he had known since high school and with whom he had had 2 children, Bill and Dan. He was having a passionate affair with a wonderful woman named Molly, whom he considered his soulmate. He was dating Donna on the side because he was afraid to commit to Molly, and he was still sexually involved from time to time with Doris, a former girlfriend, because he couldn't bring himself to break things off with her. And he was the father of an illegitimate child by Jane, a one-night stand some years earlier that had produced a little girl named Autumn, whom Thomas had been allowed to see only a few times. Thomas, who loved music, was a songwriter and played guitar, would say to me with a slight self-deprecating twinkle in his eye, there should be songs written about having 4 women. But I guess who would be interested in such songs? Sometimes when Thomas was feeling especially bad about his roaming eye, as he called it, he would practice not being attracted to other women. But he was never able to sustain his abstinence for long because he was so terrified of being alone. In the meantime, he lived by the rule, never get so close that it hurts when they leave. Thomas was racked with guilt about everything. He managed his complicated life and what he called his moral badness, his words, and sinful existence, his words, by engaging in numbers of compulsive rituals and routines, by keeping himself always at a remove from too much involvement in life, his words, and by maintaining rigid, robotic-like control at all times. He was a clean freak who took 4 showers a day, carefully wiped down the engine in his car every week, and washed the outside of his house 3 times a year. Disciplined, structured, regimented, controlled, constructs he lived by. He loved orderedness, symmetry, balance, organization. One of Thomas's rituals centered around managing the delicate strings that he experienced as being attached to his back. He knew they weren't really there, but their imagined presence and their tendency to become entangled troubled him deeply. Even so, way in advance of his appointment time, Thomas would drive to my office, carefully get out of his car so that the strings wouldn't get tangled, walk up my driveway using the same number of steps every time, come around to the back of my house, and enter the sun porch waiting room. Once inside, however, things would get a little more complicated. He had explained to me that it was easiest for him simply to remain standing quietly at attention inside the sun porch door instead of attempting to sit, because in turning his body to take a seat, he might create an intolerably anxiety-provoking entangling of the strings. Upon entering my office, he would carefully take a seat, knowing that at the end of the hour, he would then need to undo that process by reversing the order of the actions that had brought him to that spot. Very carefully, therefore, Thomas would back out of my office, out of my waiting room, and down the driveway, the same number of steps down the driveway as steps up, and back into his car, without having messed up the strings, kind of a doing and undoing. Thomas was a graceful man with a soft elegance. So he was able to manage all of this with such finesse that unless you watched him closely, you might never notice. Thomas's goal in life at that early stage in our treatment was to keep his path as uncomplicated as possible so that he would be able to avoid the potential for entanglement of the strings and thereby a shortening of his life. He recognized the irony in this, that he, whose life had been immeasurably complicated by virtue of the many bad choices, his words, he had made along the way, would be now so intent upon simplifying things. But Thomas was very worried about inadvertently shortening his life, and desperately afraid of dying he was. Were the strings to become entangled and their length thereby shortened, well, the thought of that was terrifying for him, and an all too poignant reminder of the finitude of life, the terrifying passage of time, and the inevitable end. He was tormented by thoughts of his own mortality and the knowing that nothing would last, nothing was permanent. Thomas would tell me, "I've always thought that you should not think about things that bother you. You should pretend the problems are not there. If you need to, you can have scheduled unhappiness, whereby you designate a certain period of time to think about how unhappy you are, but then it's important to move on," end quote. In a desperate attempt to ease his pain, Thomas had been drinking alcoholically for over 12 years. Although shortly into his treatment, he stopped drinking on a dime when I happened to suggest as a throwaway comment that the drinking might be contributing to his agitation and his depression. Not surprisingly, Thomas, for whom being in control was a top priority, wanted always to be in control of our sessions and of what he talked about, which was totally fine with me. And so the process between us unfolded gradually, organically, with Thomas always leading the way. In our sessions, he would share details about his life, speaking always in what he called his reporter mode. Between our sessions, he would often leave me messages on my voicemail in which he would report in with details about his week. "It's Thomas reporting in," he would always say. Whether in session or between sessions, never the feelings, simply the facts. Again, all of this was just fine with me. Meanwhile, I was becoming extremely fond of this dear man whose vulnerable, tormented soul was so racked with guilt, sadness, and pain. Thomas's father had been a very successful dentist, universally liked and admired, but he was a demanding father with very high standards. He was very exacting, said Thomas, good for the teeth, but not for the son. His mother, an actuary, was a good woman, but with more head than heart. Both parents were often absent, physically and emotionally. Early on in our work, Thomas said very little about them, other than that he had loved them and they had loved him. And he rarely spoke about his early years. There did come a time in our work, however, when Thomas began to talk about a dear childhood friend, Bobby, with whom he had been very close and whom he had deeply cherished. He and Bobby had lived next door to each other for many years and would play together for hours on end, make-believe games in which both would have superhuman powers and no vulnerabilities, and they would live forever. Thomas had loved Bobby dearly and was devastated when, with neither advance notice nor explanation, Bobby and his family had suddenly left town when he and Bobby were both 9. They had never even had a chance to say goodbye. Thomas, dissociated but clearly in pain, reported to me that he had never fully recovered from his grief about the loss of Bobby, that some part of him had died the day he found out Bobby was simply gone. As he recounted the details of their very special relationship, and then Bobby's sudden, incomprehensible, and devastating departure, Thomas shed no tears. Rather, it was I who began to tear up as Thomas spoke of his heartbreak. Thomas witnessed my tears, but made no mention of them, nor did I. But to the next session he came, bearing a poem that he had written over the course of the week in honor of his deep friendship with Bobby. It was entitled, Sometimes Sad, Forever. When you and I were young, we were forever. We were in control, and anything, everything was possible. Our lives were as one, though not really. I was you, though never quite, always simply wanting to be. But then you slipped away, unscheduled, forever, leaving me behind with this sadness, this pain, this loneliness that never lets up, ever. My dreams came crashing down around me through a frightened void, shattered, splinters lying, like an abandoned jigsaw puzzle, pieces missing, like my life. I love you, Bobby, forever and for always, but you are gone from me. Where did you go? I am lost and so desperately lonely without you. Again and again, Thomas would ask rhetorically, why would you want to love someone if they're going to leave you anyway? Thomas had been an only child until he was 11, at which time his younger sister was born. He reported, I was mean to her because I always thought that she was smarter than I was. She was a weird eater, eventually 5'6" and 100 pounds. I didn't like her that much, but I was afraid she might die on me because she was so skinny. His sister hadn't died, but when Thomas was 21, his father had a horrific death from cancer of the head of the pancreas. Thomas reported, I felt responsible for his death. When I was young, I'd been my dad's pride and joy. But in high school, I began to live irresponsibly, drinking, drugging, lots of sex. I knew I was letting my dad down. I think he had wanted me to be a dentist just like him. I was good with my hands and probably would have made a good dentist. But in my late teens, I wasn't caring much about stuff. I was just living on the edge, indulgently, destructively, and drinking a lot. I got the girl pregnant and then headed off to Europe for a year or two. I was running away from everything. It was only after returning from Europe that Thomas had finally told his father about his illegitimate daughter, Autumn. Father had been devastated and had said that he was not yet ready to meet her. This was the first, last, and only time they had spoken of Autumn. But Thomas could not forgive himself for having given birth to this child out of wedlock in the first place, and then for having burdened his father with the knowledge of it. My dad never asked me what was wrong with me or why my life was such a mess. We never talked about things like that. One day, however, just before my 21st birthday, totally unexpectedly, my dad invited me to have lunch with him, which wasn't something he had ever done before. But we never had that lunch. He suddenly got very sick and was diagnosed with bad cancer. I've always wondered what he would have wanted to talk to me about. In my life, there is part one, the time before my dad got sick. Then there is part two, the time after my dad got sick. Later, Thomas reported, my dad was so disappointed in me. I know I let him down terribly. I think I broke his heart. I wasn't the son he had wanted me to be. He had the cancer, but I think he died from a broken heart. As Thomas talked about his unresolved grief and tormenting heartache, his pain was palpable, but never any tears. In fact, as an adult, he had never shed any tears, except during sad movies. But, as was often the case, when he, ever the reporter, would speak of his pain, his internal turmoil, his racking guilt, his sadness, his heartbreak, his anguish, his loneliness, it was I who would be crying. And it happened a lot. Seeing my tears, Thomas would reach for the box of Kleenex beside his chair and hand it to me. I kept the box of Kleenex beside the patient chair and not my own, because with most of my patients, I myself didn't really need it. As I cried, Thomas would sit very still, patiently, gently, tenderly, until I had composed myself and my tears had passed, and then he would continue. Again, we never talked about my tears or what they might mean to him, or to me for that matter. It's just what we did together. He would speak of his heartbreak and I would cry. And I loved it that he, ever attuned to my face, would offer me that Kleenex. One particularly poignant moment was when Thomas was telling me about how he would regularly visit his father's gravesite, even those some years later, where he would talk for hours and hours on end, softly, lovingly, apologetically to his dad about his daughter Autumn and his regret and his guilt and his shame and all the things he wished he'd been able to talk to his dad about in the living years. Thomas would leave at the tombstone a special bouquet of carefully selected flowers for his dad, because he knew how much his dad loved flowers and gardens and interest they had shared. As Thomas talked about one of the visits to his father's gravesite, I found myself crying so much, I was sobbing actually, that Thomas had to stop talking for quite a while. Once my tears began to subside, Thomas asked me gently if it was okay for him to continue. I said, I need another moment, please. So he sweetly waited. Again, Thomas and I never talked about my tears or his lack of them. It worked for us both. Thomas was intrigued when one day I suggested to him that grieving on your own is very inefficient, but sharing the grief with someone else will make it so much more efficient. He responded, okay. You know, I had never really understood how you could complete something with someone who was already dead. Once you die, you're dead, like a rock. But maybe I could, share the grief with you. Shortly thereafter, Thomas brought me another poem, which he had just written. It was entitled A Song to My Dad. Let me just, again, sorry, my lips are so dry. It's 18%. Dad, I'm writing you this letter, pretending you'll get to know its contents. But when I imagine your eyes, dried like raisins, left lonely in their sockets, I feel the futility of it all. Writing a letter that you will never read, another exercise in self-indulgence, just time wasted. The last time I wrote to you, when I was 10 or was I finishing high school? I guess it doesn't really matter. The mandatory letters, meaningless anyway. Now, as I prepare to let you in, it is too late. 7 years or so, too late. When we were told that you would be dying soon, I climbed, shaking, the stairs to visit you in the hospital, my guts retching. I, always so good with words, shrieking inside, "Fuck you, God." And there you lay rotting on the Bullfinch ward at the Mass General, a lobby for the almost dead. I wonder if you were to sit here with me, if I could make you know how much I love you and how much I miss you and how sorry I feel. I wonder if I screamed it in your face, as I have so many times at the Linwood Cemetery, if you could ever know how much I ache for you. I need you to tell me you love me in spite of it all. I need you to lie to me if necessary. That would be okay. Then you could hug me like you used to do when I was very small and not yet a disappointment, and you weren't dead, or like you would have if I had let you, or like we did that time in the garden after we made it so beautiful and full of life, or as I should have when you became empty, your life freshly ripped from its turncoat cocoon by the bad cancer that would not relent. You were dead. You were dead too soon. You are dead forever. It feels very empty in here. I was told that after the mourning period, things would feel better. But my mourning period is lasting forever, it seems. A just punishment. I have fathered some children you would love. They would love you. They would want to spend some of their lives with you. You could hug them whenever you wanted. I could watch with pride, even as I would be filled with envious longing, hoping no one would see the pain or the heartbreak or the envy I was feeling, or the regret about all the opportunities for you and me that I had let slip through my fingers. I've done a lot of disappointing since you left. I can't seem to shake it. I can't ever be you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to kill you. I love you, Thomas. One day, Thomas, who had always come on time for every single one of his sessions, in fact, sometimes up to 30 minutes early, Thomas came 5 minutes late, having been stuck in terrible traffic and was totally distraught. To complicate matters, he was concerned that in his haste, the strings attached to his back might have become entangled. Time, of course, every single moment was so very precious to him. Ordinarily, I would not make up the time for a late patient, but with Thomas, I wanted to. And so I told him that I would like to make up those 5 minutes for him at the end of our session. He was able to let me know that it meant the world to him that I would be willing to do this. And I believe it marked one of several turning points in the treatment. For reasons never entirely clear to either of us, After I gave him those 5 minutes back, Thomas found himself becoming less and less concerned about the strings and their potential entanglement. In fact, he kind of forgot about the strings altogether, much as a young child one day simply lets go of his tattered blankie. Over the course of our 6 years together, Thomas turned his life around. As he and I grieved the loss of Bobby and later the loss of his friend, his heart began to heal, and he became more engaged in life, more invested in life, less afraid, more grounded, less terrified of dying, more present, less frantic about the passage of time, more committed to living right and well and authentically, in the moment and with passion. Sometime before the end of our work together, Thomas had divorced his wife, had stopped seeing the other girlfriend, and had called things off with his sometime lover. Meanwhile, he and Molly were getting very serious and building a gorgeous house on a lake, the outside of which Thomas was not planning to wash. One very special day, as a thank you gift to me, Thomas proudly presented me with a beautiful photograph of his family at their new waterfront home, all of them happily relaxing on their deck overlooking the lake. The photograph included Molly, his 2 sons by Sandra, Autumn, who, much to Thomas and Molly's delight, now considered their home to be her home, and Thomas, grinning from ear to ear. Thomas said that it was because of our work together that he was now able to smile. I was incredibly touched. More tears. Mine, of course. Throughout our time together, Thomas had never once shed a tear, but that was fine. Thomas told me that one of the most comforting things that I'd ever told him was when I had shared with him the idea that if you were blessed enough to be in a mutually loving relationship, then inevitably either you would end up losing that person, whether to death or to something else, or that person would end up losing you. And that's just the way it was, an excruciatingly painful and sobering reality with which all of us must eventually make our peace. Thomas said that my sharing this fundamental truth with him had been clarifying and tremendously reassuring. It had helped him to feel less frightened, more grounded, and less alone. And then it was time for us to say goodbye, and we were ready for it, sad as it was for us both. To one of our last sessions, Thomas brought his guitar and played for me Luther Vandross's heart-wrenching song entitled Dance with My Father, about a young boy's aching to be able to dance just one more time with his dearly beloved but long departed father. I never dreamed that he would be gone from me. If I could steal one final glance, one final step, one final dance with him, I'd play a song that would never, ever end. Because I'd love, love, love to dance with my father again. Every night I fall asleep, and this is all I ever dream. I would like now to share, my eyes on the time, I have just this, and then I'm going to wrap up here. I would like now to share with you what happened in the final moments of our final session. At the very end, when Thomas stood up to leave for the last time, no longer worried at all about any strings attached, I, with access to lots of tissues, reached out my hand to take a hold of his. He immediately reached for my hand, and I then placed my second hand around his. Then, after only a moment's hesitation, he slowly raised his second hand to his face, and as I followed the movement of his arm, I could see that he was pointing to the tears that were welling up in his eyes and beginning to roll down his cheeks. He smiled sweetly at me through his tears, and I, through my own, smiled back. A very special, tender moment that needed nothing more. Thomas has stayed in touch over the years and periodically comes in for a touch base session. He and Molly ended up going into business together and now run a chain of very successful high-end restaurants. As Thomas, with a twinkle in his eye, recently observed, when first he had come to me, he had 4 women and 1 restaurant. Now he has 1 woman and 4 restaurants. We agreed that although you probably wouldn't want to be writing a song about having 4 women, you could probably write a pretty interesting one about having 4 restaurants. Thomas and Molly gave birth to 2 lovely girls, Christy and Samantha, and their beautiful lakefront house is now home to these girls, Thomas's 2 sons and Autumn. Thomas is supremely happy and tells me that his life is now filled with moments of intense joy. He is aging gracefully. He's no longer afraid. His heart has healed, and he has found internal peace. He no longer has the loneliness, no longer feels alienated, no longer dissociates, and is no longer a reporter. And sometimes he cries when he feels like it. He still visits his dad's gravesite, but he now feels that he carries his dad inside of him, that at the end of the day, he did kind of end up being a lot like his dad. Ever humble, Thomas tells me with quiet, heartfelt gratitude and pleasure that he knows his dad would be proud of him. And I personally am quite sure that Thomas is right about that. All right, to conclude, thank you for, I know we're running over a little bit, I apologize. We had started with Kelly Clarkson's Heartbreakingly Poignant Because of You, and I conclude now with her hauntingly beautiful Piece by Piece, so an incredibly vulnerable song, also written by Kelly, that speaks to the damage Kelly, a Model 4 patient, sustained as a young child when her father left and headed to the airport to start another life. Damage that is now unfortunately, this is a little outdated because since Kelly and her husband have divorced, but they were together for some time and she was extremely grateful to him. Damage that she felt, and she wrote this in her song Piece by Piece, damage that she felt was being repaired by her lovingly devoted husband, obviously representing the Model 4 therapist, a dear man, or so she had felt him to be at that point, who had been helping her heal her by putting back together the pieces of her shattered heart, one by one, piece by piece, filling the holes burned in her at 6 years old. Autobiographically, Kelly Clarkson sang of her heartbreak. And all I remember is your back, obviously about the father, walking towards the airport, leaving us all in your past. I traveled 1,500 miles to see you, begged you to want me, but you didn't want me. But piece by piece, he, her beloved husband, collected me up off the ground where you abandoned things. And piece by piece, he filled the holes that you burned in me at 6 years old. And no, he never walks away. He never asks for money. He takes care of me because he loves me. Piece by piece, he restored my faith that a man can be kind and a father could stay. Piece by piece, piece by piece, piece by piece. All right, well, that's it.
Thank you so much, Martha. That was an amazing presentation. Not only did you share your brilliant mind, but more importantly, we really had the experience of the mending and the love. So thank you. Thank you, Martha, so much for this really
Thank you.
special presentation today. A lot of
Thank you.
people have been so touched.
Oh, thank you. Thank
We have a
you.
lot of comments. So
Barbara,
I
thank
think
you.
I think what I'll do is I'm going to conclude the meeting, but then if anybody wants to stay on and maybe have questions,
I would love that. So
we do
officially,
that?
without anyone
Okay.
feeling guilty or bad or whatever,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
all can just discreetly
Yeah.
slip away.
Yes.
But we'll stay on. I'm totally here.
Okay. Yeah. So just to let you know, at the end of today's workshop, I'm going to send out a follow-up email with the recording and also a survey, just so that I can improve the logistics for future presentations. I want to apologize about the technical difficulties in the beginning, but we got through it, and I think it came out well in the end. So
We hope that it was
yes.
an optimal stressor that provided
Yes.
impetus and opportunity for me to deliver my best.
Yes, yes, it was. It ended up being really beautiful. So thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
And yeah, so if anybody wants to stay on, they can. And if you want to be a part of receiving weekly newsletter about updates of future events,
Oh, yes, please.
just
If you want to
hit
be on
your
my
email.
mailing list and you're not already, please let me know. And if you want to be on Gina's mailing list for the Center for Christianity and Psychoanalysis, make sure, I mean, she has your email, so
Yes,
make
yes,
sure you open her emails.
yes. And Martha Stark has already been really gracious to teach again in September for the fall. So that's something for us to all look forward to.
My pleasure. And anybody who wants to sign up for my entirely free 90-minute weekly spot supervision Zoom sessions, they're free. And you can either attend them live or, which is what most people do, watch the recording later. You'll get unique links and you can watch it on my private YouTube channel. And a lot of people, including Gina and others here, have presented, and I think would say they enjoy it. Thank you so much. These comments from people, I appreciate it. So Gina, your computer crashed. Oh my God.
I know,
The
and I'm so glad that I got through at least the introduction before it crashed. And yeah, and then I also made you the host before I gave the introduction, which allowed for the recording to
And
continue.
I also want to clarify for people so that people aren't sitting there thinking that we're all total Luddites. I am, but the others aren't. But sort of like we know about the concept of co-hosting, and we know about the concept of the host muting. Like Abby is smiling and Gina and Martha. We know about that. There was something different this time. Just truly, please know that. Because I know there are a lot of comments are like, well, you can just mute them. Sort of like, well, a little tricky.
Yes, thank you for that acknowledgement, Martha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, fresh. Oh, good. All these things. So do people have some questions, please? Like raise your hand and then I think, oh, yes, good. And Barbara, oh, good. So I'm asking you to unmute. Can I do that or I'm not the host? Okay.
Yeah, people can unmute themselves, and
Can they really?
yes, people can unmute themselves. And
There's Barbara.
I think Abby actually has kept track of the questions. So can Abby go through the questions, Martha?
Yes, why don't we do Barbara and then we'll go through the questions?
Okay, that sounds good.
Because Barbara had the courage. Thank you.
Okay.
Real quick, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, yes.
We're still recording. I don't know if we want to do that or if we want to
I
stop
do.
it at this point.
I do.
Okay.
You all know that you're recorded. So if you're going to tell deep-seated secrets about yourself, don't. Unless you want the world to know. That's okay too. I told a few about myself. So there you go. And let me just, I'm sorry, I am interested. Oh my goodness. All of you good people. Oh, it's so cool to see you all. Oh, there's Ruth. Hello, Ruth the dancer, and Gigi and Karen and Eric Craig. Oh, this is truly wonderful. There's Hannah. There's Hannah. Oh, good. Asan again. Gail Buff. Hello. And Ryan. Okay, good. And Yasik. Okay, good. So go for it, Barbara.
Okay, thank you. I have to say, I am really just blown away by this talk. This may have been the most thoroughly rich, just incredibly rich on every level talk I have ever heard in my life. I can't I am absolutely astounded the amount that you have integrated in theory and emotion and meaning. I'm just blown away. But I very specifically, if I go down to a little D, you said something in particular I wanted to get back to when you talked about regression in service of the id versus regression in service of the ego. How do you tell the difference? I have a
Okay, good.
picture. I'm
That is
always
the
trying to figure
question.
that out. Okay.
And that's where I came up with my little, if you're gratifying an id need, which inadvertently or advertently we will do periodically, you give them an inch, they want ever more. So
Mhm.
you make the, I think, probably mistake, say with many, of letting them email you or text
Oh,
you. And then they bombard your inbox.
yes.
That was
I,
retroactively, that was an id need. If you gratify an ego need, then for the time being, they are deeply and profoundly satisfied and grateful. So after the fact, and then going forward.
I guess I was wondering more specifically. I have somebody who, at a particular point, it was a long-term, several times a week patient. I, on her birthday, sang her happy birthday.
Oh, that's
I
beautiful.
thought we were playing. I thought it was deeply felt, but for forever, it has been such an issue that as she has progressed, there's ways that she holds on to some things that I don't feel comfortable doing now. And
Wait a minute. Wait, I wasn't expecting
go
you to
ahead.
go there. So
Yeah,
earlier on in the
yeah,
therapy, you had
yes,
sung her happy birthday. At the
yes.
time, that seemed to be tremendously important for her.
Tremendously important. But then other things would happen, like, for example, the degree of upset when I wouldn't reschedule a session on a Sunday because that was her birthday. There would be that kind of experience. Now, I mean, we could just deal with that as a grieving, if I don't know how.
Oh, wait a minute. When you had sung her happy birthday, which probably was
Yes.
within the first year, because within the first year is when she'd had a birthday.
No, it was
No,
actually probably about 6 years in.
6 years in, you sang her happy birthday because you were meeting on the day of her birthday,
Yes.
as it happened.
And a number of things unfolded. Yes.
Well, let me just say, and then I want to get more into the feel of
Yeah.
that, but let me just say, sometimes what can happen is where we talk about Fairbairn, the seductive slash exciting slash rejecting or abandoning object. Inevitably, and it's okay because it provides impetus and opportunity, we will have done something exciting, call us an exciting object, promising thereby a certain kind of relatedness. We will have done something.
Mm-hmm.
But then, for whatever mix of reasons, either we can't or we don't or we forget or whatever, we then
Mm-hmm.
don't. And we become experienced as the rejecting slash abandoning object, which
Yes.
Fairbairn, as we know, calls the seductive object. It get that then in general, but I want to go back to your patient in particular, that
Okay.
provides impetus and opportunity for there to be where you acknowledge and you get it that initially you had promised a certain kind of something, but then ultimately rescinded it. And so there needs to be model 3, Darlene Ehrenberg, negotiating at the intimate edge, the turbulence that has arisen where they had reason to believe that since you did it once, you should be willing to do it thereafter.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Now, back to your particular case. 6
Yes.
years in, you met on the day of her birthday and you sang her happy birthday, and she appeared to be delighted.
Absolutely.
All right.
Profoundly meaningful. Yeah.
Okay. Then a year later, surprise, surprise, she had another birthday, but it wasn't on the day that you meet. So that was not a birthday song she got, or did you call her up and leave a message?
Yes, it was probably 2 or 3 years later. I didn't sing her birthday the second year either, I don't believe, but there was some way that she felt held and seen. And then there was a year where she wanted me to meet with her on a Sunday to celebrate her birthday.
Mm.
And when
So
she
that was like in year 8 or 9.
Yeah, okay. This was somebody who was so dissociated for years that there was
Now, was she ever busy asking for things from you that was very hard for you to deliver on, or not really?
absolutely many, many things.
Oh, many things. If you
And
had
many
said
and many and
not, if you had said no, I would have said then I guess I would have met on Sunday with her. But you're now telling me that in fact there were many things she was asking for over the course of the years, and you were often in the position of saying no.
I was often, this was somebody, there was so much dissociation. I was often in the position of finding structure and exercises and ways to hold her between
Some
sessions.
kind of adaptive resolution, something that wasn't
Yes.
exactly what she'd
Yes.
said she wanted,
Yes.
but close enough.
Yes. And I was always in a position of trying to define what was her need, what was my tolerance, how much did she, what was a need and what was a desire. There was,
Moment by moment, you were assessing whether it's something that really needed to be gratified or needed to be, she needed to work through her disillusionment, model 2, grieving, needed to work through her disappointment that she wasn't always going to be able to get everything she might have wanted. So you were
yes,
ever
yes,
busy intuitively, I call it
yes,
internal interoception, where you
yes,
attend to what's going on inside of you to
yes,
inform how you
yes,
then respond or react.
yes, correct.
I mean, has she been able successfully to do much grieving in general, apart from the birthday concept?
Um,
Does she, when she
well,
encounters a no or disappointment, has she
yes,
been able?
yes, she's extraordinarily better, very functioning, very, yeah. So we're in a very different place now. I'm often in a place of um, trying to define um, just the way you put it, what's in service of the id and what's in service of the ego. When am I gratifying? And she really could manage this versus she really does need for me to step out of the more usual.
Well, again, let me just say, I'm so comfortable making a million mistakes. And so I'm going to be busy watching or listening.
Uh-huh.
And if in fact I sort of venture into something and it's sort of not right, then I'm going to back off. I'm going to sort of
Uh-huh.
whatever. I mean, so it's not. I'm going to try to catch it sooner
Uh-huh.
rather than later. But of course, maybe by then the damage is done. But it's
Uh-huh.
all part of Model 3 negotiating the intimate edge, where they're drawing you
Uh-huh.
into either failing them in some
Uh-huh.
way,
Okay.
or Model 2 opportunity for grieving.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Okay.
there's no way Winnicott couldn't and didn't, and Michael Balint didn't sort of, what's an ego need and what's an id need? Again, it's their response and not to shy away from being a disappointing object. I mean,
Okay.
in Model
All right.
2, where
Yeah.
it's disillusionment, by definition, for them to be able to fill in deficit, structural deficit, they need to have the experience of optimal disillusionment and grieving that, whereby
Uh-huh.
you initially become a very disappointing, disillusioning object, and they're very angry and they have to grieve that. But then
Yeah.
adaptively, they'll internalize the good that you have been. In Model
Yeah.
3, when they're playing out on the stage of the treatment, the old bad, charged, toxic somethings, projective identification, and you're certainly failing them some version of what had happened for them
Yes.
early on. There
Yeah.
too, there'll be a price, it'll be get pretty tricky, pretty intense for a while there as you're
Yeah.
negotiating at your intimate edge. Ultimately, though, detoxifying, a graduated detoxification of the charged toxic that they were imagining you to be. I'm not
Okay.
really answering your question, but I'm kind of
Yeah.
giving some hints.
Well, you give me a lot of ideas and I don't want to take up all your time, but
Thank you
very,
so
very
much,
much.
Barbara.
Okay.
Anytime. Please
I,
email me. That'd be
I
great.
would
And
love to. Are you
oh,
giving your email to people or
oh
did
yes,
it?
yes, I'm going to say it right
Okay.
out loud. It's
Okay. Thank you.
Martha Stark, MD. So that's MarthaStark, MD, at, and now it is synergymed.solutions. That's the way you think it might be. SYNERGY med, MED, as in medical, dot solutions, spelled as you would think it would be. That's the extension. That is the end. And also, by the way, if you want, I have done up finally, and I thank Teresa Tisdale and Rachel Berg Martinez for all sorts of wonderful things. I have done up my master spreadsheet. It's now available in PDF form. So it's much more, it's 20 inches by 8.5. It's 1,000 lines, and it is not concise. It's a summary. It's an outline of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy.
Oh, great.
And it's 1,000 lines, and
Uh,
it's 5, 6 columns. And
Okay.
please email me. I'll send it to you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you
There you
so
go.
much.
Okay,
All right.
because of the limited time, can we go to Abby? She's keeping track of all the questions and kind of go through that. Would that be okay, Martha?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay.
And Abby, I would like you to sort of vet the questions a little bit. If it's far afield, please don't ask me. Like in case someone says, how do you bring about world peace? That's not my strong suit.
Okay, great. The first question is just pretty logistical. Like, a lot of people want to know how to join the group that you've mentioned. Do you want them to email you?
They should email me, yes.
Okay.
Martha Stark, MD at synergymed.solutions. Yes.
Okay, great. And I put that email in the chat in case anybody
Thank
missed
you.
it. Okay, we have one question here. I think this was from Sean. Martha, in your experience, how do you handle surrendering to your patient's needs when they are reasonable but outside of your normal frame? For example, attending musical performance.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, let me just say, when I was in medical school, there was something called the second year show. And we, Harvard Medical School students, would put on a performance, and we just totally roasted all of our professors. And because I did my dancing back then too, I had a nice dance part. And I invited my therapist, and she came. And I don't think that fucked me up. I mean, I already was fucked up in certain ways, but I don't think that fucked me up. So it's really case by case. You know, pay attention to your gut. And let me say, I also have with some of my people now, we call it take back. If they say something and then they just don't feel they wanted to have said it, they can take it back. And even though it registers on some level inside of me, they can take it back. By the same token, if I say something and I want to take it back, I'm allowed to take it back. We work together, we, at our intimate edge. We really do. I mean, we really, and so how do I know what to gratify, what not to, or when I'm going to do something outside? I mean, as I've gotten older and older, I've become ever more, I don't quite want to say loosey-goosey, but I want to say ever more sort of, I got the smile there, ever more comfortable, intuitively, sort of just letting myself be real. And that does not mean, Stephen Cooper had made a nice distinction between self-revealing, self versus, which is telling them about your childhood, which I'm not specifically inclined to do, but self-disclosing, which is more about sharing something that has to do with the here and now engagement, what they've elicited in you or whatever. And I will be then a certain amount of self-disclosing. Parenthetically, if a patient asks me a question, they don't tend to, quite frankly. I mean, everybody knows everything by looking online anyway. But anyway, if they ask me a question that I'm not sure I really feel comfortable answering, although again, that doesn't happen much, I will say, listen, I don't want, I don't want potentially to throw things off here. It's more important that, well, I don't know, that I'm thinking of a question that whatever. It's whatever. Anyway, but at the end, as we get near the end of our work, if you find yourself still having that question, then by all means ask it, and I will probably answer it. I'll think seriously about answering it. But anyway, so it's a lot about tuning into what you feel in that moment, and it changes moment by moment, what you feel you would want to gift the patient. You know, and also what I'm all about is getting a sort of kind of language going with each patient. One thing that I've done, which is really interesting, instead of saying narcissistic, which is a very big word, and even though there's healthy narcissism, usually most people think, well, narcissism is a bad thing. When a patient is sort of very self-centered or narcissistic, let's say their name is Jonathan, we now refer to as Jonathan-centric, meaning sort of focused. The other thing that we'll do is when the narratives that they had downloaded early on onto the quantum computer of their unconscious, when those, you know, become the filters and the lens through which they experience self, others, and the world, distortedly. So I will now call it Jonathan thinking, which means a little
Mhm.
distorted thinking. I don't use a big word like, well, that's distorted, but
Mhm.
we call it Jonathan thinking, and it gets them to realizing it's like, oh shit, man, yes, it is true. That
Mhm.
is the kind of thing I do.
Mhm.
So I kind of answered the question there, I hope. I hope. All right, Abby, go for it.
There was a question a while back in the chat about just how you guide parents in your work with children.
How I guide parents. Well, one thing I do, the way I was trained for the most part when I work with kids, somebody else works with parents, and then I talk to the person who works with the parents. But how do I guide parents? One thing that I do when I'm working with the kid, whatever the age of the kid, I mean, I just tend to work with the kid. I don't do family therapy. But if a parent wants to be involved, then, or wants to communicate with me somehow, either then write me a note that you give to your patient, give to the patient who comes in, and we will read it together. There's not a chance in hell that I'm willing to have a secret little something going with the parent. I don't do that. So if they want me to know something, they write it down, and they give that letter to the patient, who then gives it to me, and the patient can read it and gives it to me, and then we read it together. And I'm all about, yeah, my loyalty to my patient, So I don't really work directly with the parents. So I don't really do family therapy. I don't have training in family therapy. So I don't do that. I work with kids, I work with adults, I work with couples. I don't really work with families per se. So the parents. Now, sometimes I work with a couple who are parents, and we talk about their kid, but that's not quite the answer to the question. So.
Okay. Abby, are there any final questions? One question, because I'd like to go to Adamar Grant and have her question be the last one and conclude our time together today.
Can I just real quick, like, oh, yes, Gina Jones, thank you. Yes, was thinking of you. Let's see. Kathleen Hanna. I'm allowed to just, oh, Sharon, oh my gosh. See, you have to go. Yeah, Sharon stayed up until 2:00 in the morning to watch this. Gigi, thank you. Christine, thank you, Christine. Aizwan is just such a sweetie. Aizwan is such a sweetie. They're not even words. Okay, Najwa, oh, good. And you others are also sweeties, but that was what came to me. Is there a specific site to go to sign up? Synergymed.solutions is my email. That's not my email. That's my website. That's my website. I love to, on your mailing list. So if you want to be on my mailing list, just email me. Okay. Oh, Teresa, thank you. Esther Marway. Oh, thank you, Mar. Okay, Sean. Oh, so many wonderful people here. Jonathan Miller. I say, be a little happy that I'm not involved with forum. Oh, I'm a little like, oh, heavens. Everybody can see. My wife would be happy that I'm not involved with 4 women in how I process my emotions. This vignette is your dance together. Gave me hope that perhaps I can experience life differently as well. And perhaps as a therapist, share my own meaningful tears with my patients someday down the road. Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Listen, the fact that you could share that says so much already. That touches me deeply. Barbecue, amazing. I'm almost done here. Okay. Rosa, how music and lyrics. Yes, what I usually do, but I didn't set it up this time, is we have a Cold Heart by Elton John and Dua Lipa. And we always play that if there's a break. And then we all dance because I'm really into that. So there you go. All right. Well, listen, I know we got to stop. I know we ran over half an hour, and I really appreciate Abby and Gina bearing with me and all the rest of you who are
So
still
Martha,
on here. Oh, Bill Kerwan. I want to say hi to Bill Kerwan.
Okay, we have one more person who would like to ask a question, and I thought we could end with Adamar Grant. Are you willing to answer?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just so busy looking at these names. Hi, Carol. Of course.
Yes, there's a lot of comments for you.
Yes. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Okay.
And Marjorie Gans. Yes.
Adamar Grant. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you
Close
so
enough.
much.
That means it's close enough.
It's fine. Totally fine.
How do you say your name?
You say it. You say your name.
It's fine. It's Adamar. Yeah, that's fine.
There you
It's a Gaelic name, so that's perfect. Thank you all for staying over, and thank you, Martha, very much. I just wanted to say I've done therapy for 30 years with a Jungian background, lucky enough to have mentors who always led with the heart. And I was so touched by your presentation.
Oh.
So touched.
Oh. Thank you, Adamar.
Utterly
Thank
touched
you,
at the way in which there's many ways to understand your tears as a projective identification. The best form of you picking up what the patient couldn't express for himself. So you literally carried. So what I did want to ask was about your decision to never speak what was going on.
You mean with little Amy? Little Amy?
No,
No.
with the last patient. What was his
Thomas. Oh, I spoke quite a bit. You mean I
Right,
speak about my
but
tears?
you never, exactly. You never, it's from what I gathered, what I picked up, you didn't speak about his lack of tears, nor did you speak about your tears. And what I'm thinking is that in many models, you would think about your tears as the projective communication. You picked it up, you lived it out. But I was really intrigued by your decision not to speak it. And I wondered if you could, if you've, and you may not have anything to say, but I wonder.
Thank you for that. Let me see. Thank you for that. I think it was so powerful for me, the moment of meeting, and I just sort of knew that's not his thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I didn't need him to cry.
Mm.
And I cried because I was so touched.
Yeah.
And it became just something we did together. You do that with your patients. You have a way, like I have one patient, sort of a different feel, but he'll say to me, now imagine you're probably going to get in my face about it. And I said, yeah, you betcha.
Exactly. Yeah.
We know that I get, or I'll say, I want to get in your face about that. Or then I say to some of them,
you have a shared language. You've a lived language.
A shared language.
Yeah.
And I've said to one of them, are you kidding? I'm like trying to shame you. And sort
of
well, you're not succeeding, but I want to shame you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
And the humor. I mean, I appreciate that you picked up on the humor and the playfulness in it.
Totally. But also the holding. So yeah, and I see that it was from the experience of being with the patient.
I mean, I just loved him to pieces.
I could tell
from the beginning. I just love this man to pieces. That's just the way it goes, and that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, thank you so. Very, very powerful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Hello,
and this concludes our time together. And please look out for future workshops. We will be featuring Dr. Martha Stark again in the future. So stay tuned.
Can I just get them stay for one more second so I can just see who these people were and just thank them?
And then Martha, can you stay on as well?
Yeah, I'll stay on. Yes, I will.
Okay, Martha and Abby, please stay on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Martha, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martha. This is Sanya from Pakistan. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
There's Iris, Julie, Patricia.
Yes, thank you, Martha, and everyone for organising. Yeah, I've tuned in from UK, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
This is so Rosa, Karen, Gigi, Jacek.
Quite international.
Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia. And Mar. Hi, Mar. And Gail again. Oh, hi, Gail.
Thank you from Canada. I really appreciated your presentation.
I'm sorry, who?
Iris, I'm from Edmonton in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you'll email me. Get on my list. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha, from Germany.
Oh, I know, Ava, your voice. Thank you, Ava. Snow-capped mountains. Yes. And there's Iceland.
Welcome from Manila.
From Eric Craig there.
No, this is
Manila.
This is William that's speaking.
Oh, Bill. Yes, because you just landed. Yes, from the Philippines. Yes, Manila.
Yes, Bill.
Bill and I just love the Blue Bloods, the TV show. And we love other things, Fairbairn and Karen Horney and other things, not to be confused with Karen Horney, but whatever. And but we loved Tom Selleck, and we were devastated. We were truly devastated when Blue Bloods ended its time. But we will find other things. And Bill and I work together, and it's wonderful. He's such a sweetie. He and his wife Midge. So thank you, Bill.
Thank
All right. I
you.
know that
Thank
Gina and
you.
Abby are
Thank you,
kind of
Martha
eager.
from
Yeah.
New Mexico. This is Eric. I'm thanking you from New Mexico.
Oh, good. And I think I've mentioned that Craig is my middle name. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah,
There you go.
thank you. Yeah,
There you go.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye all. Thank you.
Hi, Iswan.
Okay.
Okay. Cleto, there I got the wave. Karen Miller. Okay.
Gina, was this recorded? I've been in a medical clinic and I just got in.
Yes, it's recorded. Mhm.
Something happened, so I'll have to view the recording if you can send
Yes.
it.
I'm gonna send it to everyone on the registrant list, so you'll be
Okay, great.
receiving it shortly.
Great, thank you.
I'll
Thank
try
you.
to get it out today, but you might get it tomorrow too.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
And
I'm
Carol, it's always so good to
recording
see
right
you.
now.
Mhm.
I apologize about the technical clumsiness today. I'm still learning myself. So
So now are you hoping that people will get off the call? Is
yes,
that the thought? So that
yes,
very gently and sweetly, even though I'm kind of
yes.
working against that because I keep saying hello to people.
Okay, so maybe what I could do is just end our meeting here and then I can